Welcome to stage 12 of the Build a Lancaster Hachette versus Hong Kong models. Today we're working on the wireless operator seat. The wireless operator seat is assembled and fitted at the rear of the cockpit. Internal framing is fitted to the sides of the cockpit. So the parts list is as follows: A. Wireless operator seat and back panel. B. Seat back cushion. C. Seat cushion. D. Hydraulic reservoir. E. Rear panel. F. Side cushion. G. Hydraulic reservoir base section. H. Railing. And then we also get 2 DP screws, 4 CP screws and 5 AM screws. So in stage 1 we need to take the seat and back panel A and the cushions C and F. Note that each cushion piece has 2 pegs which are different sizes. Fit the pegs into the corresponding holes in part A as indicated above. Take the seat back cushions B and fix it to part A as indicated. The cushions are push fit connections, but you can use a little glue if necessary. Take the rear panel E and fit it into the back of the seat panel A. Pegs on part A fit into the sockets in part E. Push the parts together firmly to ensure the parts are fitted correctly. Take the hydraulic reservoir D and base section G, fit the square peg on part G into the hole at the bottom of part D as indicated. Make sure that the arm on part G is pushed right up against the base of D. Check how the arm fits into the slot in the rear seat panel E. Glue in place. Take the cockpit assembly from the previous issue. Identify the slots in the floor 3A where the wireless operator seat assembly is fitted. 2 tabs on the base of part 12E fit into the slots. Fix in place using a little glue if necessary. Note: check that all parts are securely fixed before proceeding. You will need to turn the assembly over in this issue. Take the starboard cockpit framing assembly from issue 8. Check how the framing 7A fits against the starboard side of the cockpit floor 3A. Fix in place with 4 AM screws as indicated. Take the framing assembly from issue 2. Check how the framing 02D fits against the forward end of the framing 7A. Fix in place with 3 CP screws as indicated. Take the LED and cable 4P. Note that the arm on the left in this diagram is longer than the other. Thread the connector on the cable through the hole in the floor assembly. Fit the part into the opening so that the pegs on the arms fit into the recesses in the floor 4A. The railing 12H fits on top of the part 4P. Square pegs on the base of the railing fit into holes in the floor as indicated. The insert shows the railing 12H and the light 4P in place. Note the angle of the light. The panels at the base of the railing help to hold the light in place. When you are happy with the fit, glue parts 4P and 12H in place. Take the port side cockpit framing from issue 4. You will need 4 AM screws supplied with this issue. Check how the framing fits against the port side of the cockpit floor 3A. When the screw holes at the lower edge are aligned, a peg at the right of the top of part 7A fits into a socket in part 4A. Fix in place with 4 AM screws and 1 DP screw. The wireless operator seat and an LED and railing have been fitted and the first framing panels have been attached to the cockpit. Nice issue, quite happy with it, but an awful lot of gluing, I think. So there are next set of parts for floor section and screws. So the guess is going to be 3 screws. I can see a bit of complaining coming from next issue. At the lack of parts, you get 1 piece. please do not ever judge on a single issue. Yes, you're paying £11 for a single part. There isn't going to be a lot to do. If you're new to Partworks, what you're going to discover is that is the way it goes. Sometimes you get issues which are lots and lots and lots of work. Sometimes you get issues that are not a lot. I tend to find about half an hour is a rough average. 15 minutes to 30 minutes is an average per issue. Okay, that's the build done for Hachette. Let's go and see what I've been up to with the Hong Kong model. Okay, so welcome to my 12th video. I hope you enjoyed the Hachette version. So this is stage 17 of the build, and what we are going to do is combine stages 13, which is this stage, which I think is looking rather nice, and we are going to combine it with stage 15, which is this one. Not so much colour going on, a little bit at the back, but I think it's still looking rather nice. Now, as you can see, these come in two pieces, and what we need to do is join these pieces. And this is actually kind of for a little bit of an experiment for me, because I've done this side. Is this the starboard side on the right hand side as you're looking at the front? So I'm doing it through the correct procedures, you know, painting, adding them together. What I'll be doing for the port side, which is the left side as you're looking at the front, is I'll actually be doing it backwards. So it means that we'll actually do it in one stage less, because I'll be joining the two unpainted sides together, and then I'll be painting and adding in the small details. The reason I'm doing that is I want to experiment, because this is where it could possibly go wrong. If you join two painted sides together, you run the risk of the glue destroying the paint. Then you have to go through and do touch-ups, and then you have potential paint colour issues and all sorts going on. So what we're going to do then is join these. Now, the way these join is where the wing joins, you will see that there's the lip there, and that's going to sit onto there. But in addition, at the same time, we have two lips there, one there and one there, which is going to go over. It's going to go over, and then you have two tabs there, which is going to go over. So it's kind of effectively going to join in this kind of manner. So you can't come in that way or that way. You really do have to come in from the side, and we do our test fit as normal. And I can see the biggest struggle is near the bottom, but that has gone in nicely. And as you can see, the join is actually strong enough that if I hold it, it's going to hold it on. So that's obviously going to make life easier. Now, the priority for me is for a nice join on the inside. I want that as perfect as I can without having to do any filler. The reason being is, if when I turn it over, if there's any work to do on the outside, that's absolutely fine, because this is unpainted. Now, if I can get it all in one, that will be absolutely perfect. But it looks like we're going to have a gap issue there. But on the whole, it looks pretty good. And I think the way that I'm going to do this is I'm just going to glue this where the wing joins and pop that in, and there will be minimal squeeze out there, and then we can work separately on the outside. And one thing I did notice during the dry fit is that as you bring the parts in, say there for example, that gap really does close up. So I think what we'll do is we'll use our slow glue, which I think is stronger, and then we'll just apply some glue there and a little bit of glue on the outside tabs, and we're not going to worry about the other tabs just yet. Okay, so I'm using ordinary Tamiya. This takes a little bit longer to dry, but I think it gives us it gives us a bit of working time, and it also, I'm convinced it gives a stronger bond. Now, because there's paint on there, the correct procedure is actually just to give that a bit of a rub with sandpaper, but you know me, I'm as lazy as they come. So I'm actually going to give that a very, very thin layer, and then I'm just going to leave it a second, because I know it's going to remove the paint, and I know it's going to, the glue doesn't bond to the actual the glue doesn't bond to the glue. Sorry, the glue doesn't bond to the paint. So then I'm just going to apply another thin layer on there. Make sure it's thin, I don't want squeeze out. And obviously it's got to be, whoops, that's too much. If you get too much, just remove as much as you can from the brush and then just go over it again. Okay, and then we'll fully assemble this there, and I'm going to squeeze together and hold it in, applying as much force as I can from different angles, and I'm just going to hold that a little bit. Try to hold the model from the edges, that way if you do get any glue you're not going to ruin the inside, the paint job. As you can see, I've made a slight mess on the outside. That's not going to be a major problem. One area where it's a little bit helpful is that this has got recessed rivets, not raised rivets. What that means is that if we do need to sand those rivets out at a later stage, we can just reapply them with a riveting tool. Okay, now you can tape this down and leave it for a long time, and what I'm doing is I'm looking at the gaps in the wing, and there is a small gap there. I'll see if I can fix it. I did a test fit earlier on and this was absolutely perfect. As you know, as soon as you do it on camera with real glue, it's not going to work so much. Bit of a gap formed there. Excellent. So I think I will leave that for a short period of time. Okay, so this is not fully cured, but it is dried. What I've done is I've given it a little pull and it's not going. So that is stuck down well enough for us to deal with. Now, what we're now dealing with is we have two sides that are not painted. And what we want to do is just try and get these in as nicely as we can. And what I'm going to use for this is Tamiya Extra Thin. The reason I want to use Tamiya Extra Thin is because it will naturally fall into any recesses. So we don't need to try and get a brush into there. We'll just dab it with glue and it should take care of itself. Now, there is a habit that I have, which I have seen, I think it's warped plastic. And this is something I knew about anyway. And it's a habit I'm trying to get out of and develop a new habit. And that is, you do not need to paint along two lines. Let me see if I can find something to practice with and I'll explain. Okay, so what I have here is two pieces of plastic which I want to glue together. Now, what I mean when I say capillary action is that I'm going to get a paintbrush to demonstrate this. I think that'll be easier. Imagine this is our glue brush. What we do is, as we touch this with the glue, there's a very minute gap there. It doesn't matter how close we have this, there's a little gap, and the water will naturally run in. You won't be able to see it because it just doesn't show up on camera. I will obviously try my best, but all you need to do is just dab the glue. And we talk about using capillary action to our advantage, yet this is how we glue pieces together. We get our brush and then we run the brush along. Okay, and that went out of focus, but I'll try and do it again. So we get our brush and we run it along. and that's fine, that's okay, that does the job, right? And then as you'll see in a couple of seconds, it's glued the part together. Fine. But we talk about the capillary action and we don't actually use it properly, and this is me included. It's a habit I'm trying to break. I'm going to show you something, and I really hope this capillary action shows up. If we just dab a single drop of glue in there, it should run along the crevice. It's gone out of focus again. And that hasn't worked. It's because I didn't have the two parts held together. Right. So we have our two pieces of plastic. And we just pop a single dab in the middle, like one drop. We give it a little bit of time to just grab, and then when we let go, you'll see it's still done its job. And that's because it's used the capillary action to run along itself. We don't need to paint everything along, and we're going to try to do that properly today to use it to our advantage. It's an absolutely great product with many advantages, so it's just a shame when we don't use that advantage. So this is glued in the middle. Okay, what we want to do is make sure these ends are glued together. Now there's a little shelf there, as you can see. Let me bring it in closer. You see that shelf with a little gap? So what we're going to do is we're going to bring that gap as close as we can together, and remember that capillary action. We'll just pop a single drop of glue in there and we'll hold that. Give it maybe 10 seconds, and there you can see that's now held. Okay, and then once that's held, we'll keep it, find some way of holding it together. I found a little gap there and one there, and I'm going to hold it with my finger, and I'm holding it as tight as I can, and I'm just going to put 2 or 3 drops along that line, and I'm really trying hard not to run the glue along. Okay, and as you can see, that's grabbing quite nicely. If we want to apply glue on the inside, we can. I'm trying to avoid it because I don't want the glue to ruin, but we'll pop a little drop there, and that should run inside, and then we'll drop a single drop of glue. Can you see the capillary actions run along the edge there? And we'll drop just where these main joins are, and then I'm just going to pop a couple of drops where the wing is joined. We have an invasion. Okay, and I'm going to stop about halfway. I'm only focusing on the top half, and I'm liking that. That's working quite well. Now, it's not perfect along there, and I'm actually going to do absolutely nothing about it. The reason for that is a lot of this will be covered up and it will be on the inside. But if there has to be a gap, I'd rather it's on the outside than the inside. Okay, and I'm just going to leave that for a bit, and I'll come back to that once it's dry. Okay, so I've given that a fair bit of drying time, about 10 minutes, and I'm quite happy that that top is glued in. So now we want to do the same process on the bottom. So there's nothing really to hold on to, so I'm actually going to pop the tail. I'm going to hold it into my stomach just to give it a sharp point, a point. And then what we're going to do is we're going to push these two sides together, and again using the same procedure, drop a couple of drops in there all the way up to the end, and then we can hold it. And then any areas that we think might need a little bit extra help, say this wing root, we're just going to pop a couple of drops in there, and that glue will get right in there. Obviously the more glue we can get in there, the harder the bond is going to be. So I've gone a little bit off camera there. So 2 or 3 drops, and then this bit I'm not so worried about. I don't think we're going to see it once it's all closed up, and then obviously we'll do the gaps in here. I put a couple of little bit extra I put in there, and then I can see I've got a bit of gap around the wing root, so I just want to go in there. That was quite nice actually, that capillary action, and this might act as a little bit of a very slight filler effect. We'll see. That hole there is actually taking quite a lot of glue, so we'll give it a lot of glue. There could be a gap underneath. Okay, don't be frightened to use the glue. Okay, and I'm rather happy with that. It doesn't look perfect at the moment, but we'll try and tidy that up. But what we'll do is we'll give that a good hour or so, laid down on a flat surface, just to give that time to dry. Okay, so I have let that dry for a considerable amount of time. So if we have a close look at the inside, it's a little tiny bit scruffy, but do you know what? I'm okay with that. By the time we've got the pilot's area and the navigator's area in, a lot of this is going to be covered up. We will be doing some more drilling later on, but I think that's absolutely fine. Now, the problem comes on the outside. Remember I said if there was going to be problems, I'd rather it was on the outside, and there is. There's actually a step here, so we are going to have to sand that down, which means we're going to lose all of our rivet and panel details. So I think the easiest thing to do, if it's happened on this side, we can assume it's going to happen on the other side. Now, I've spent a lot of time explaining what I'm doing, which means that gives me a lot more time next video, because I can just say to you, glue in the usual way, and then I think what we'll do is we'll sort this out on the next video. I think that'll be a lot easier. And then we'll do both of them together. In fact, I might even do this one off camera and then explain what I've done and do the second one. One other thing I wanted to say, in a previous video we stuck these windows in and I said about how white they are. I did show the glue when it was dry, but one thing I want to show you is with my thumbnail, I'm not pressing really hard. I think if I push this hard enough, that window would come out. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to push it. You can see if you look at the redness in my thumbnail, you can actually see I am applying a fair amount of pressure. I'm applying what I would consider more than a reasonable amount of pressure, and then that glue has gone in absolutely fine. Now the glue I use, just to remind you, is Speed Bond. And I used that because it just happened to be at hand. But to be honest with you, you'll get exactly the same results with PVA glue. Right guys, that is it for this video in terms of building. What we're going to do is we're going to go over to the costings and then we'll give it some scores. So this is the comparisons for issue 12. Now, for the Hachette, I'm going to be quite generous too. I thought it was quite nice. I was quite happy with the way the pieces looked okay. We find ourselves starting to put together some pieces that we made in previous issues. So we're going to have lots of less bits floating around. The negative that I found, and this is a bit of a bugbear for me, it's a pet hate. On the instructions it says you will also need screws and unused parts from several previous issues. So why are they giving us the screws? This issue gives us screws, but it doesn't give us all of the screws by the looks of it. So that's a little bit of a negative. So I'm going to give it, I'm hovering between 1 and 2. Let's give it a 2. Now, obviously, with the Hong Kong version, I've not done an awful lot. That's my fault. But then again, that's a positive, because you can do as much or as little of this model as you want at every session. But I am going to give it a 1. The parts aren't fitting quite as nice as I want to on this stage, but they're nice. And one thing we've got over Hachette now is we've got an almost full length fuselage. So Hachette is up to 17, Hong Kong 19. So the Hong Kong's still about 2 ahead. Remember, this isn't a scientific, under lab test kind of testing. It's most of this is opinion. You may be reading this series and you may have Hachette as 5 points ahead. That's absolutely fine. So let's go back to the costs now. We've done the wireless operator seat. The issues cost us £10.99. Nothing for the Hong Kong models. So far, up to issue 12, you would have spent £118.88. One thing I will bring up every now and again: do not look at individual issues for the Hachette and go, well, that's not worth £10.99. You will find that if you judged every issue on its price based on what you get, some issues will look very poor value for money. Other issues will look absolutely excellent value for money. And us being humans, a natural human tendency, we will remember the bad issues, but we don't always remember the good ones. You will get some good pieces. To be honest with you, I think what we've got in this issue is quite fair and reasonable. So we've still spent £729.97 on the Hong Kong, which is £611 down. But remember, going with the basic model with not many extras, we're only £259 down. And let's say the Hong Kong version is winning by 2 points in my own opinion. So next week is issue 13. Talking of not getting an awful lot, you will be getting the floor section and screws for Hachette, whereas we will be working on, let's see if I can remember this, we're working on the left side of the fuselage, which, if I have got this correct, is the port side. I think I read somewhere you need to remember that there is no port left, and Starboard has lots of R's in it, so we're working on the port side of the fuselage. So take care, guys, have a fabulous week, and I hope to catch you next week. Bye bye.